when I use the word play, I'm often using it as a permission-giving opportunity to explore, to experiment, like without judgment that you're talking about. The instruction, in the first instance, I often give that instruction in a very generalized sense. But there is targeted play as well, isn't there? Can you
Yes.
can you unpack the difference between those two, like generalized play and targeted play?
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
So generalized play, it still needs to be granular, meaning sometimes too blank a canvas for a singer is challenging.
Yeah.
But I also say that when you think of songs and we say, oh, I'm singing a sad song, so I have to be authentic and I have to be sad. That is true in the performance, but we're talking practice. And what you want to do in practice, the goal of practice is to optimize the vocal motor skills so it can be automated. So that when you're in performance, you have flexibility to draw in whatever spontaneous creativity, artistry that you want in that moment. The only way to have automation and flexibility in performance is if you practice diversely. So for example, I do this a lot. I'll pull out a feelings card. So say you're singing a sad song, I will pull out terrified, or I will pull out overjoyed. So even though it's a sad song, these other emotional cues or character cues, like pretend you're a preacher or a cabaret singer, even if it's completely opposite to what the song intention is, it will generate a motor response that the brain will remember, and that you may say, hey, I know this is a sad song, but when I sang it like giddy and twice as fast, there was some cool stuff that happened with my voice that I liked. And your brain likes efficiency. It latches on to the things that work. This is how babies learn to walk, right? They're not learning by dreading what happens when they fall down. A toddler doesn't go, I'm such a bad toddler, that was a terrible toddle, right? They capitalize on the successes. So this kind of generalized play, I use character, I use emotion. The targeted play is when there's, say, a typical pedagogical issue that voice teachers face. And whether you teach, Broadway or classical or even pop, there's this tendency to want to add weight and effort as you ascend. And I think that's biological too. I always joke that it's because whenever we had to go high as humans, it was always to go, there's a tiger over there. And so there's this natural tendency to want to add weight. So you can use targeted play, and I'll have little things like, this is my resonance ball. And if it's an interval that's like, right, they have this wide interval and they go, da, da. I'll have them throw the ball down. That's one play thing. It's like, or we'll play catch. I'll also have them come at the note from above. So it's like, da, da, da. And I'll just have them use the ball and follow the resonance. And so again, it's not saying, can you be a little lighter up there? And then they start listening. It's giving them an action that really recruits the instrument as a whole, rather than trying to get at parts, because there are 100 muscles trying to coordinate. So trying to say, be a little lighter, what does that really mean? So this gives them a gesture, an object, an attitude. Or sometimes I'll say, pretend you're hugging a baby sheep. I have no idea why baby sheeps enter my teaching studio, but there's a lot of baby sheeps. There's like, if I want light and energetic, I'll be like, oh, they're little baby sheeps that look like clouds that you have to tickle their bellies as they're bouncing above you, imagery like that. That's how the brain wants to vocalize. Yeah. The piano doesn't want to be played that way. Vocal is for communication. It's for detailed communication. And that's what this play idea does.
Do you think there's something in because many of the activities that you were just talking us through had a sense of externalization? What is in that? Because there's often this sense that we're, putting it out of oneself and getting the voice out of oneself. What do you think's involved in that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a complex question. I think there's the one piece is the physicalization is
Yeah.
part of the vocal motor learning. So we have and that's a neuroscience geek thing, where our two laryngeal motor cortices are near our limbs. And so gesture, I have a whole talk on gesture and why that's important. So that's one physicalization. The externalization, I do think the voice is such an intimate, personal thing that being a character or playing a different emotion or being silly does take us outside of that ego, maybe, perhaps, especially if I'm crazy alongside of them. I think that helps. I think it helps if the teacher is, by demonstrating these things, it makes people feel a little more comfortable. Now, sometimes you want, of course, stillness, and you can find playness in that. Sometimes I'll have people like close their eyes and pretend they have a tiny little gift in their hand that's only for them. And again, it's storytelling. And again, this goes back to why we vocalize. Play is a fundamental thing in biology. Vocalization is fundamental to our communication. And so we're combining those things in play. And then ultimately, what that does is it gives the brain information. The analogy I make is the weather. Singing is predictive. Speaking is predictive. Everything you do is calculated in advance. It's crazy to think about that. It feels bizarre, but we even know up to a half a second, even pitch is calculated. So how is it calculated? Through experience. And it needs algorithms. It's not a computer, but it needs experience to what I call triangulate, to become automated. So you're giving it more varied information. A lot of times we just try to focus on a single target. And that's why in performance, people can fall off the rails, because they're like, I practice it perfectly, but they only practice it one way in a certain context. So you want to practice things slow, practice things fast, practice things loud, practice things quiet, and also practice things differently. Not all the time, because then that would be crazy. But I liken it to ironing. There's going to be one or two spots in a piece that sort of are the troublemakers. And I tend to focus my play on those. And then once those are ironed out, everything else falls into place. And I'll do the whole piece with a different character just a couple times, like 3 different ways. But the targeted stuff usually is 1 or 2 places in a piece.